Language and Composition students, welcome to Lesson 52. This is the second passage of our second multiple choice practice test, and let's see what we can get out of it, more than just what the written explanation said. Okay, so we always want to pay attention to the title, and we have this Canadian novelist and origin of stories. So, one thing you might not have noticed is the questions sometimes refer to which paragraph something is in. And if you're not aware, every time you indent, that's a new paragraph. So this one with children is our second paragraph if they refer to the second or the third. So just be aware of that. So this passage is also not too difficult. I don't think you should have had too much trouble with it, so hopefully we can go a little faster through it. Now, this is about hearing stories, okay? So listening and obtaining stories through listening. So, oral societies, listening. Well, what happens first? We have children who unwittingly hear stories through eavesdropping, and there's a lot of wording here that's a little intriguing. We've got scandalous, ominous, and forbidden knowledge. So the kids are hearing stuff that they're not supposed to hear, but she refers to it as forbidden knowledge. Yes, these other words are a little extreme, drawing us in, mysterious. Forbidden knowledge, though, yes it is, but that terminology we should be aware of. There's a question on it. It's a biblical allusion. You might know because it's one of the most well-known stories of the Bible. In the Old Testament, in the first book, Genesis, Adam and Eve were told by God to not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but they did. So it created problems. Well, that's what she's equating it to, something that's very, through that allusion to the Bible, we maybe would get a feeling that this is almost sinful. Maybe that's what she's trying to bring up. Okay, so we do have that. There's a question on that. Well, we have some figurative language here. All right. Kind of cute. But those who hear, as children, they start to become tale bearers, blurting things out. And then she starts to make the jump to, this is what writers are. So, children begin to be the storytellers, and writers are grown-up storytellers. We're supposed to get that idea. We remained talebearers. There's a question on that, right? So writers are equated to children, right? Writers are adults who are talebearers, but they are remaining what they were as children, talebearers. Okay, so now we end that. She ends that paragraph. We learn to keep our eyes open, but not to keep our mouths shut. Eyes open, mouths shut. We learn to and not to. Totally opposite. That's an antithesis. I don't think there's a question on that, but you should notice those types of techniques. All right, now there is a little bit of shift in the next paragraph, but not a major shift, but that's what a new paragraph is, a new idea. All right, this was all little forbidden stuff, but now not. All right, there are stories that we are meant to hear, even as children. The end of this paragraph, there's a question on. It's only when we are older that we are taught to regard one kind of story as real and the other kind as mere invention. So when writers are writing, and oftentimes more likely fictional stories, that we don't value them, we're taught not to value them is the idea, just because they're not practical like dentists are practical. writers are put in a different category, not performing a function that we need so much. So there isn't a strong tone but we get the idea that she's sad about that. It's unjust. All right, last paragraph. There is a bigger shift here than in earlier paragraphs. We have kitchen gossips, mothers, grandmothers, mother tongues. So this is not just about the stories that we learn, that we overhear and learn to tell, and even as people go into a profession of doing so. Here, it's about the sources more, right? The people sources more. So it's focusing mainly on women, but also there's a reference to, let's see, that grandfathers hopefully would become storytellers too, but it's really mostly women, right? Right, so that's the idea of this passage. Now let's go into the questions. Told you I'm going a little faster this time than first passage. And we don't have to go over every question now because I just went through so much by explaining the passage. Overhearing, eavesdropping, all right? Children first come into contact by listening to people, or not this other stuff, okay? There is some of this, but overall, this covers all the situations that were mentioned. So for number 12, well, here's something that you do need to understand because this terminology is referred to quite frequently. When you're learning, especially a foreign language, and it's not natural for you, you have to learn different categories of words and their names so you can refer to them. So the pronouns as subjects are oftentimes categorized into a box, a chart or table with 6 components, 6 parts to it. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is called, the top on the left is first person, then second person, then third person. Those are all the singular. On the right is first, second, third in the plural. So this is referring to first person. First person in the singular is I, and the second person is you. The third person is he or she or it in pronouns. And the plural is we or our or us in the singular, you or your in the possessive of the second person, they, them, their in the third person. So we have in the first line of this passage, it starts with our, and in the very first line still, the pronoun we. That's all first person, but it's plural. All right, so that's your answer. Now, going on to the next question. So ending paragraph 2, which one of these wasn't there? They were trying to be tricky here, all right? They're trying to trick people. Which of these wasn't in there, but then if someone is really not paying attention, they say, oh, look at, they quoted from there. I'm not going to look back at the passage. There's 3 dots, that's an ellipsis. All right, so that must have been there. Something else must have not been there. No, in the original, there was no ellipsis. There were no words taken out and 3 dots put in. If we looked more carefully, we'd see that sentence at the end of paragraph 2 is compound complex, right? But anyway, there is no ellipsis, so it's easy to find that answer. But you have to look back at the passage and know that that wasn't there originally. All right, already went over. Forbidden knowledge is a biblical allusion. The writer is like a child. Because children become little storytellers, but writer adults remain talebearers like those little children. That was what that was referring to, that excerpt. Yes, society does not value the storyteller because it's not a practical profession. Remember, it's not performing a function that we need, like a dentist fixing our teeth, right? So that's what that was about. Predominant tone. Well, the best technique you can always use, especially if you're getting a little confused, but you should always use it, is process of elimination. There's a little bit of unhappiness that grandfathers haven't become, storytellers, and that writers aren't valued, but it's not that extreme. It's not that positive. It's not just praising or anything, and honoring. No, it's not strong. It's not that strong or that sweet, so it has to be this one. But what does that mean? That she's being very astute to details, noticing what's happening, noticing where stories come from, but hoping a little bit, yearning, hoping a little bit, that storytellers, adults, writers would be valued, and that grandfathers would become storytellers too. So there is that hope, so that's why it's that. The author makes use of which of the following? Well, there are always cause-effect everywhere. Can we get something more precise here? Yes, we can. There are no little stories. There is nothing being described in steps, very much in steps. There might be one step. How to do something or so on. There's no series of events that are happening related to one another. So exposition is more explaining and persuading. Yes, there's a little bit of persuasion. She wants us to believe her way. And there is a lot of explaining. So it's that. The shift is from the stories themselves to the storytellers. That's in the last paragraph, traditionally, that word. And the primary purpose. Well, the title of this passage is The Origin of Stories. Kids overhearing, and then the women who tell them. So it's E, looking at the sources, right? Sources of storytelling. So if we pay attention, the answers really are all there. There was nothing that tricky. So that's all for this part 2. I'm going to go